Alright, number 10. Anti-Monitor. During the events of Forever Evil, the crime syndicate of America of Earth 3 invades the Prime DC universe, escaping the threat of their complete destruction back on their homeworld. For almost the entire comic event, the CSA all allude to the threat that destroyed their home and just how terrifying it is. The threat itself even makes a cut in the universal barriers just trying to make its way into the Prime universe. After the CSA have been defeated in an awesome fight with Earth's villains, Superman speaks about how the threat they spoke of has to be Darkseid, and he begins preparing for Darkseid's return. But for us readers, we get to learn that the true enemy the CSA were running from was actually the incredibly powerful Anti-Monitor, who had destroyed almost all of Earth 3's reality. It's a cool reveal that leads straight into Darkseid War. Number 9. Ultron. Ultron is a villain that really just pops up over and over as he constantly reinvents himself in different ways. Now, one of his biggest reinventions was when he created an Age of Ultron, which became the name of the 2013 crossover series. Here, he finally achieved his goal of taking over the world. He created machines to hunt down anyone who failed to submit to his rule, with only a small group of heroes surviving and trying to oppose the mad Ultron. He was finally brought down by a program planted in his design by his creator, Hank Pym, after a time-traveling Sue Storm and Wolverine warned Pym of the future threat Ultron would pose. There is also his whole character arc in the MCU's What If animated series as well, which was honestly really cool to watch, and I did not expect it to go the way it went. Number 8. Armless Tiger Man. You may be wondering who the heck Armless Tiger Man even is, and you know what? That's fair. Honestly, his return is not the only thing we never saw coming, because his creation was something I never saw coming. But here we are with a German amputee with pointy ears, sharpened teeth, and enough leg strength to bend steel. He had an incredibly brief career during World War II and was eventually taken out in Wakanda by one of the Howling Commandos. But what was really surprising was when he reappeared in Incredible Hercules number 129 to 131 in 2009. He was among a group of individuals that were the Greek god Pluto's jury of the undead, and they together put Zeus on trial and subdued Herc himself. If you guys are enjoying this video, or you like this channel, make sure you drop a like to let us know that you like what we're giving you. And in number 7 is Superboy Prime. During the massive Dark Knight's Metal event, the trinity of Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman go to a collection of 3 dark multiverse worlds that each have the 3 main crises from DC Comics happening on repeat. Only each of these worlds' crises are happening differently than they were supposed to. Wonder Woman ended up in the world where the Infinite Crisis is constantly on repeat. Only in this world, the heroes lost and Wonder Woman is met by Superboy Prime, who hasn't shown up in the DC universe for quite some time now. Now, he isn't entirely a villain, like he definitely has been, but he has always wanted the best outcome, but usually in the worst ways possible. But now, in this death metal event, he fights toe-to-toe against the Batman Who Laughs and seemingly destroys him. Or does he? Number 6. Green Goblin. Green Goblin's most despicable act would have to be the passing of Gwen Stacy. It was shocking, and it caused Spider-Man to beat the heck out of him before Gobby was famously impaled by his own glider. Boom. Done. The end. Well, no. Little did anyone know that Norman Osborn was in fact alive and devising a master plan that he hoped would ruin Spider-Man forever. His Goblin formula apparently gave him powerful regenerative abilities which allowed him to survive the impalement, and Norman fled to Europe. Osborn manipulated events from the shadows to have Peter Parker believe he was in fact a clone, and that Ben Reilly, who was a clone, was the original Peter Parker, eventually revealing himself and taking down Ben, who sacrificed himself to save Peter. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Riley's body disintegrated, proving that Peter Parker was in fact the real Peter Parker and Spider-Man all along. But by this point, everyone had truly accepted that Green Goblin was just out of the picture. Number 5. Magneto. Speaking of the Judgment Day event, in the X-Men Red comics, the story actually featured a whole Magneto comeback all of its own, which was incredibly awesome, and I think it deserves a mention. Magneto isn't really a full-on villain anymore. He has an incredibly complex moral compass, which makes him more like an anti-hero than anything else. He's a fan favorite, which is why it was incredibly hard to watch him get his heart completely ripped out of his chest by Uranos during Judgment. After Uranos had completely decimated the population living on Mars though, Magneto reveals that he is actually still alive, using his powers to control the iron in his own blood to keep his blood flowing. He used his power to carry on surviving without a heart. It's completely insane and totally awesome. Number 4. Dr. Doom. In 2009's Fantastic Four number 566, Dr. Doom reveals that he had actually learned everything he knows from one incredibly powerful reality warping villain called the Marquis of Death. Doom also dropped the little tidbit that the Marquis would be showing up. Only when the Marquis did show up with his new apprentice, he was less than happy with the progress Doom had made on Earth, and he attacked. The Marquis warped reality, made Doom think he had won, then snatched the victory away, set him on fire, turned his heart to stone and his blood to acid, then sent him back in time to the Pliocene age to be eaten by megalodons. The Marquis goes on to fight the Fantastic Four, almost beating them, and then, when the Marquis is on his last legs, his apprentice shows up and straight up slaps and destroys him, but not before revealing that he is actually Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom survived being eaten by a megalodon, gained enough power and dark magic to completely change his form, he became the Marquis' apprentice again, and even defeated Uatu the Watcher so he wouldn't be discovered. All of that to get his revenge and finally defeat the Marquis of Death. Number 3. Vulcan. We're going back to the X-Men Red story yet again. I'd say I'm sorry, but I kinda love this story, so I'm not. How everything happens is still being somewhat explained, but what we do know is that Vulcan is being used as a pawn on a chessboard by Abigail Brand, the director of S.W.O.R.D., which is like S.H.I.E.L.D. but in space. So basically, on the planet Mars is a mutant population called the Iraqi, and they are pretty combat focused. They decide who makes up their governing council with trial by combat. Well, when Vulcan made a play to make it onto that council in issue 3, he was very much defeated. Like, it seemed like he passed away. But it turns out that Abigail Brand either resurrected him through the mutant resurrection protocol or helped heal him, as in issue number 9 of the comic, he shows up out of nowhere again and is essentially challenging the Empress of the Shi'ar Empire, believing himself to still be their emperor like he was all those years back. Number 2. Starro. Sometimes when villains return, they don't always go back to their villainy, and they don't always come back in the way you might expect. The intergalactic conqueror known as Starro has been an enemy of the Justice League for years. He has given them a run for their money many times, and since he's been around so long, he has danced around with his morality. Well, Starro was eventually defeated and he pretty much perished. Sort of. Batman seems to have taken a part of this giant starfish and put it under his care to assist him and the Justice League with its incredible psychic capabilities. This new creation is called Jarro, and he is awesome. Starro himself isn't actually completely gone, as we find out a bit later, but Jarro just wants to make his dad, aka Batman, proud. He even dresses up as a Robin to try to be the best Robin ever. It's fantastic. And in at number 1, Sinestro. Sinestro is Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps' greatest enemy. He was imprisoned in the Central Battery on Oa during the events of Emerald Twilight, where Hal Jordan went completely bonkers. In a last-ditch effort to defeat him, the Guardians released Sinestro in an attempt to stop Hal Jordan from destroying the Corps, and their battle was brutal. It eventually came down to a bare-knuckle fistfight, and Sinestro drove Jordan to go over the edge and snap Sinestro's neck, taking him down permanently. But this is a list of returns. So, in a later retcon, it was revealed that the Sinestro that Jordan snapped was really a light construct, and that Sinestro and the Parallax entity were actually the ones responsible for Hal Jordan's descent into villainy. So now, all the Hal Jordan fans can rest assured their hero is still squeaky clean. And honestly, a really cool return for a really awesome villain. Alright, coming in at number 10, Mar-Vell. Let's start part 2 off a little differently, with a hero who returns as a villain. Mar-Vell of the Kree was Marvel Comics' original Captain Marvel, and he was also the first Marvel superhero to permanently pass away when he succumbed to cancer in 1982's The Death of Captain Marvel. The character has reappeared in visions or in flashbacks, and obviously in alternate realities. One of my actual favorites of that is Mar-Vell of the Cancerverse. It's just a really cool and creative idea. Basically, on his famous deathbed, the many-angled Angled Ones contacted and corrupted the dying Mar-Vell, granting him new powers which he used to transmute the other heroes, and with Mar-Vell as their lord, they took down the Avatar of Death, which in turn completely destroyed Death itself, allowing the many Angled Ones to invade their reality. Number 9. Jor-El. Good guys coming back as bad guys is fun, but some of you may not have liked this one. Jor-El and his wife Lara are extremely famous for shooting their son Kal-El into space using the last remaining prototype spaceship and allowing themselves to succumb to the destruction of their home planet, Krypton. Kal-El landed on Earth, grew up as Clark Kent, and became Superman. Well, in Superman Volume 3, number 32, we are introduced to a villain known as Mr. Oz. And just to ruin the whole point of Jor-El's sacrifice and kind of the whole mythos of Superman, it turns out that Mr. Oz is Jor-El. As Krypton was crumbling away, Jor-El was whisked away by a mysterious force. Who was Dr. Manhattan? Shh, don't tell. He was brought to Earth where he crashed in a war-torn nation where Jor-El was forced to witness the atrocities of man. Jor-El adopted the moniker of Mr. Oz and began manipulating certain events from behind the scenes to try and, I don't know really, make humanity good, I guess? The surprising reveal was not expected, but it wasn't really welcome either. Number 8. The Red Skull. Okay, so there are a few times the Red Skull has reappeared over his comic book life. Actually, there's a lot, but I want to move over to the MCU for this one because when he just happened to be a floating wraith-like being chilling on Vormir in Infinity War, I actually verbally went, what? So, at the end of Captain America, the First Avenger, the Red Skull puts his evil hands on the Tesseract, and it opened up this big old window into space. And the Red Skull started like being ripped all apart to pieces and then shot through that window looking thing. So it turns out that that was actually a wormhole and he was pulled through it and landed on Vormir, where he became stuck in a state of limbo and he had no choice but to serve as the Soul Stone Stonekeeper. After Thanos gave up Gamora to gain the stone, Red Skull became free to do whatever he wanted, and so who knows if he'll ever reappear again. Number 7. The Joker. In the Three Jokers story from 2020, 3 crimes were committed on the same night, seemingly all by the Joker. Thanks to Batman's time on the Mobius chair during Darkseid War, he knows that there are indeed 3 Jokers running around Gotham. The original Golden Age Joker, known as the Criminal, the Killing Joke Joker, known as the Clown, and the Silver Age Joker, known as the Comedian. Jason Todd, Barbara Gordon, and Batman himself all team up to go after each Joker one at a time. It doesn't nearly go that smoothly. This is one of the best Joker stories in recent years. It almost feels like it stands alone outside of any kind of continuity. It's incredibly good, and the revelation of 3 different Jokers was something a lot of people just never expected. But what I think is even better than 3 Jokers is the chaotic feeling of not knowing if there was actually 3 or if there is a definitive Joker until the end when you find out. Number 6. Uranos. The Eternal known as Uranos first ever appeared in Marvel What If number 24 in September of 1980, in a story that explained the origins of the Eternals. Now in this story, Uranos is trying to convince his brother Kronos that the Eternals should use their massive amounts of power to take over the world. He believed the Eternals would best fulfill their duties if they exterminated both the deviants and humans on Earth, all life outside the universe, and then imprison the Celestials, but his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, sparking the Eternals' civil war. The war culminated in his defeat and banishment to the planet Uranus. Surprise though, this isn't actually what happened. The Uranos, who was banished to another planet, was actually a clone, and the real Uranos was banished to the Exclusion, which is where Thanos and Druig go in the recent Eternals The Heretic story from 2021. Here we are introduced to a very different looking Uranos who becomes the weapon of Druig against the mutant population in the Judgment Day event. Number 5. Doc Ock. Another interesting take on the return of a villain. Doc Ock is near the end of his life, but you never really stop being a villain. So, in an incredibly surprising twist, he figures out how to swap minds with Peter Parker. So now, Doc Ock has seemingly defeated his #1 foe and defeated death itself, as he now inhabits Peter Parker's body as the superior Spider-Man. Calling it a return is a bit of a play on words, as he never really leaves for a length of time, but he returns from his imminent demise as his #1 nemesis, and he even kind of outdoes Peter as a hero, if not of a bit of a brutal one. He eventually gives Peter back his body, and after inhabiting a few other bodies, he eventually returns back to his own after a deal with Mephisto.
Number 4. Mimic. Mimic started off as an iconic mutant villain when he first appeared in X-Men issue 19. He has resurfaced in the comics on more than one occasion and was mentioned, but we haven't seen what he's been up to lately on the mutant island nation Krakoa. All that we know is he's probably there doing something? Mimic's powers allow him to copy the powers and skill set and level of those within a certain vicinity to him. He was like the original Rogue or Hope Summers when it came to his mimicry abilities. Over time, some of the abilities he's taken, those of the original X-Men, set at their power levels that they were at originally, became permanent for him, and he no longer needed them nearby to use said powers. So he has those ones permanently. But it should be noted that they're capped at original level.
Number 3. Bullseye. The villain Bullseye is actually one of the more brutal villains from Marvel Comics, in my opinion. But this is seemingly proof of that fact. In Daredevil Volume 1, issue number 181 from 1981, that's a lot of ones, Bullseye has been hired by Kingpin only to find himself replaced by Elektra. In his anger, he uses his throwing cards and her own Psi to take her out of the picture permanently. Unfortunately for him, Elektra and Daredevil are very close, and Daredevil is not a fan of this. After a heated battle high on the rooftops, Daredevil lets Bullseye fall to what most thought was his demise. It was honestly really shocking for fans of the hero, but it turns out that instead Bullseye had indeed survived his fall, but was now paralyzed with a broken spine. It wasn't until Deadpool Volume 3 number 34 from 1999 that he gets his bones laced with adamantium by Lord Darkwind, allowing the villain to finally recover and go back to his mercenary duties. Number 2. Kraven the Hunter. In Kraven's Last Hunt, Kraven the Hunter tracked down Spider-Man, beat him up pretty badly, buried him alive, wore his costume, ate some spiders, and then took his own life. Was it messed up? Absolutely it was, but it was also possibly the best comic he'd ever been in until that point, and a big going out moment for the villain. He even got replacements with other members of his family going on to fight Spider-Man. He was gone, done, out of the picture, but then out of nowhere came the Grim Hunt, where that same family, who stepped in to successfully replace him, found a way to revive him using Kane Parker's body, who they thought was Peter Parker. I think it was unexpected because it was just kind of unnecessary and a little convoluted, but the Grim Hunt was cool, so I wasn't really complaining. And in at number 1, the leader and Abomination. Okay, I'm gonna get like a little meta here, and also I got 2 for 1 in this one, so combo for you guys. The MCU's Incredible Hulk movie has always kind of been a bit of a black sheep. Obviously, Bruce Banner morphed into looking like Mark Ruffalo after previously looking a lot like Edward Norton, but a large majority of the characters, except for Everett Ross, just kind of disappeared from any later MCU stories. But now, thanks to Shang-Chi and the She-Hulk show, we got back Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination, played by Tim Roth. And in the new Captain America movie that is going to be coming out soon, we will also be getting back Samuel Stearns, who started to become the leader at the end of the Hulk movie, and was played by Tim Blake Nelson. Now, what I really want to know is if we are going to get back Ty Burrell playing Doc Samson, because I would love to see him with the green hair.
Number 10. Goblin. Goblin was a pretty interesting and unique mutant who first appeared in the pages of Alpha Flight in issue 48 back in 1987. Goblin is the twin sister of Pathway, Laura Dean. Both siblings have been members of Alpha Flight in the past, as well as Beta Flight and Gamma Flight. While Goblin was in her mother's womb, they actually sensed early on that she was a mutant because of her unusually goblin-like appearance. Her parents wanted to abort her because of this, so her sister, Laura, who was in there with her instinctively, used her own mutant powers to teleport Goblin to Live World for her safety. For a long time, people actually thought Goblin was Pathway, and that Laura could actually just transform into Goblin. Eventually, Laura and Goblin, as well as everyone else, would learn the truth about their relation to one another, and their swapping of places throughout Laura's life. Goblin and Pathway have both not been seen for years since they left Department H. Goblin's mutation has resulted in her being super agile, possessing a unique appearance, and having a slight healing factor. It'd be cool to see, I think, both Goblin and Pathway return. They've been gone for so long. What are they up to? Where'd they go? Guess they're just roaming around in Canada? Number 9. Hijack. David Bond is a mutant that I personally quite enjoyed having in the comics, but who I don't think we've seen for a few years now, unless I completely missed him popping up on Krakoa somewhere. I don't think he's even been spotted there just yet, like not even in the background that I can recall. Though we have gotten a few technology-based mutants such as Sage, Trinary, and Warlock back as major characters, Hijack still remains somewhat forgotten to the sands of time. Where did he go? David Bond is a technopath who is able to command and control all kinds of vehicles, more often cars, but we've also seen him take control of the SHIELD helicarrier and Sentinels before besides. One of the helicarriers anyways. Number 8. Copycat. Copycat is someone whose real name you might recognize thanks to the Deadpool films. Vanessa Carlyle is her name, and while we got a version of her in the films who is Deadpool's love interest, which also happens in the comics, the cinematic version of Vanessa is pretty different from her comic book counterpart, who I might add also has now been permadead for years. Copycat in the comics is a mutant who has powers similar to Mystique's, except her powers can't be used as creatively as Mystique has used hers in the past. Remember when Mystique turned into paper? That's what I'm talking about. Copycat's powers allow her to impersonate and shapeshift into other humanoid beings, even copying their powers if they have any. At least we've seen that happen before. Her powers also make her impersonations so good that even those closest to the person would be fooled by them. In theory. With mutants able to return, it would be interesting to see how Deadpool and Copycat might interact in the future if she was to be resurrected. And she's a mutant, so could happen. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about some forgotten mutants, you want to reminisce and look back, be sure to let us know in the comments below. Give this video a like. Honestly, I have so many more mutants that I want to talk to you about, so it's a gift for you and a gift for me when you do that. Number 7. Forget-Me-Not. I don't think this list would be complete without Forget-Me-Not. This mutant's real name remains unknown, likely because of how his powers work. Forget-Me-Not's mutant power is that he is basically undetectable. No one, even people who have met and know him, is able to remember his existence. This makes him hard to even notice in a room, and Professor X himself had to actually set a mental alarm clock reminder like every little while in order to keep Forget-Me-Not in his mind. In the end, Forget-Me-Not was literally forgotten by all the mutants, and we haven't really seen or remembered him in a long time. He was spotted, however, momentarily in issue 9 of X Factor for those that were really keeping an eye out for him, but that was only in the corner and background of one single panel as far as I know. So I don't know if we can classify that as any major return for this character, who still seems to have gone unspotted by some and definitely seems to remain forgotten. Sadly. Number 6. Gentle. Gentle is a mutant from the nation of Wakanda. He made his first appearance in the 2004 series New X-Men in issue 23. Nesno Abidemi had it rough when he was younger, as his father was Russian and his mother Wakandan, which meant he grew up always being treated and feeling like an outsider. His power grants him superhuman strength as his muscles can rapidly expand in size, making him super strong, but also at the cost of being in immense pain, both physically from the expansion and due to psychological trauma that he carries with him from his past. Because of this, Gentle is covered in unique and iconic vibranium tattoos, which help with the pain and also help him to better control his powers, preventing him from overexerting himself and potentially dying while using them. Gentle is a really cool character, and although you may have spotted him partying it up on Krakoa, he hasn't been given much to do as a key player in any of the current X books just yet. Number 5. Bandera. As someone who is currently reading the original run of Wolverine, I can't in good conscience create this list and leave out La Bandera, a favorite supporting character and mutant of mine from that series. La Bandera made her first appearance in the 80s Wolverine series in issue 19. Bandera went on an adventure with Wolverine where she helped him put a stop to the tyrannical and militaristic rule of President KRAVEN in Tierra Verde, also helping Wolverine to defeat an ancient monster that KRAVEN had unleashed known as Spore. In the end, she stayed behind in Tierra Verde to help the people there transition to a more democratic form of government. She wouldn't even get to remain alive for a decade in the comics, being killed off in the mid-90s in an issue of Captain America. The island of Krakoa and the planet Mars are now where mutants call home, and resurrection protocols are in place to bring all fallen and lost mutants back, but we still haven't spotted Bandera yet for some reason. Where's she at, the 5? Bring her back! I'm looking at you, all 5 of you mutants that are resurrecting everyone. Get to it. Chop chop.
Number 4. Raquel. You may not even know who Raquel is. Well, she was the totally awesome empress of the Skrull Empire. She took control of the empire from her father's usurper. She was empress of the Skrull Empire up until their homeworld's destruction at the hands of Galactus. After this, she was assumed to have perished with the planet back in 1983. Well, no. In 2020's Empire event, it's eventually revealed that Raquel found out about her son, Hulkling, and so she teleported away from the Skrull homeworld before its destruction. She then embedded herself deep in the Kree Empire as Tanalith, a Kree prisoner. She worked her way up the ranks of the Kree with the intention of merging both the Kree and the Skrull empires, but for her own motives.
Number 3. Caliban. Caliban made a brief appearance in the 2019 X-Force series in issue number 1, but only so that he could basically get shot in the chest. Yeah. Otherwise, although Caliban has been one of the main Morlocks that we've come to know in the comics over the years, he hasn't really made a lasting impression in any of the current X books, more acting as a victim in the brutal Krakoan massacre that rounded out the end of that first issue. Caliban has never really been depicted as a super powerful mutant, but he is an important character in terms of the story and the history of the X-Men. His mutant powers allow him to sense and detect other mutants, and other than that, his powers are conditional, really only kicking in when his life is threatened, granting him super strength and the ability to absorb and multiply the fear of others. Number 2. Layla Miller. Layla Miller is the wife of Jamie Madrox, Multiple Man, who we've seen quite a bit throughout Krakoa and the X-books, as Jamie's dupes generally are used to undertake various massive work efforts on the island, and off the island. Whether he's aiding in Krakoan medicine and drug production, or helping to sew and create everyone's Hellfire Gala outfits at the behest of Jumbo Carnation. But while Jamie has been everywhere, Layla has been almost nowhere in sight. We do get a brief glimpse of her more recently through a computer screen, and then throughout a couple in-person panels in X-Corp issue number 3, where we learn that Jamie's and Layla's son, Davey, is about ready to take his first steps. Yay! Layla wants Jamie to leave the lab to come home and witness those steps, but Jamie responds that the launch he's supervising is too important and he can't leave. Layla frustratedly hangs up on him, and Jamie later sends a dupe in his place, planning to later absorb the dupe and therefore acquire the memories of being there with his son. But other than these few moments, Layla has been MIA. I know she's busy with Davey, but it would be really cool to see her in action, as she's a really cool mutant and a really cool character. So bring Layla back, please. Number 1. Destiny. Destiny is probably one of the most anticipated mutants to return. She has not been forgotten by her wife and lover Mystique or by readers, but pretty much everyone else on Krakoa seems to be interested in forgetting about her. But still, using her journals to likely try and figure out the future to come based on her prophecies. At least I assume that's what Moira McTaggart is doing with those journals. I especially want Destiny to come back because I just want to see her and Mystique reunited, and because I kind of want Mystique to sow chaos and destruction and just generally raise hell in order to get Destiny returned. And then I want to see that payoff, like I want to see it actually come to fruition. Just sounds like a cool story. We'll likely be getting something to that effect in Inferno, but only time will tell if Destiny will return or not, before, during, or afterwards. She might not return at all, because Alan Pryor's also coming back, so Inferno could be about that too.